Anyway, so today I wanted to talk about our doggies, right? The government efficiency guys. They're about to go across to the Potomac and go to the Department of Defense, to the Pentagon. They actually probably won't. They'll go to the Pentagon itself, but there's other data centers they'll go to. These guys are being headed in their action team by some techies, right? Some AI techies that have this AI that a couple of different versions of it, and it runs and looks for indicators for irregularities. Okay, it's not specifically seeking for fraud. You could do that, but this is just irregularities in the accounting system. The problem that the doggies are going to run into is that the Department of Defense, going all the way back into the 1920s, and it's really its early nascent formation as this kind of an organization, has been storing data in ways that are designed to obscure, designed to provide a flat base that if you're looking at the books in an accounting sense, in a forensic accounting sense, you get down so far and then that's it. Everything seems normal at that level. Perhaps there's a little bit of irregularities that you can put down to inefficiency or maybe, that sort of thing, or minor corruption, that sort of thing. The problem is that the Department of Defense, all of their data storage goes nowadays basically to hide a vast quantity of money being siphoned out into the black projects, all of which lead to zero-point technology and space aliens. And the obscuring factors in this are going to be such that Musk's techie guys are going to run into these walls. AI will tell them that there's something that there is a wall and that there's something on the other side of that wall, but it's not able to determine what is on the other side, and that's because of the way the data stuff is structured, right? And it was designed this way. Well, it grew this way as they went along, and secrecy became more paramount than efficiency or this sort of thing. And that I'm figuring that has occurred sometime in the very early 50s, but before the 1958 geographical year or a geophysical year. That was the globalization at that point of the secret civilization here in Earth, the corporations versus the space aliens. So that in my opinion occurred in 1958. In that year, we get the declaration of an international geophysical year, and then all these nations go down and slice and dice Antarctica. From 58 onward, the Department of Defense started getting the subcontractors, the ones that were doing the black projects and stuff, dealing with the space alien tech, started becoming more and more sophisticated in their ability to hide stuff. The problem is that the cost of secrecy grows over time faster than the degradation of the money and faster than the natural growth of the organization absent the secrecy layers. And then also you get into the really evil part of the corruption, which is that the doggies are going to discover that there's money that's been allocated to killing people that discover this kind of thing, right? That discover the space aliens or reveal it or whatever. And there's also money for false flag operations to redirect the public should such a thing occur, such as the recent Trump Tower explosion, the mention of the drones in that email. It's not a manifesto. That's a propaganda word put out on it. It was just simply an email that this guy had going, right? Anyway, though, and how much of that is part of the op, who knows? So at this point, we can't trust anything. And everybody's getting to enjoy what the doggies are rooting out. We're starting to get some real progress here. Some of the money is being returned to the coffers of the country that would otherwise have been sucked away into, Democrat child trafficking or who the fuck knows. Anyway, though, at its core, all the way down there, with all of the corruption, is the secrecy that is overlaid on the zero-point tech and the space alien stuff. And the doggies are going to run into this. It's not going to be like their ordinary corruption. That grew on top of the black projects. of its own, because Democrats saw that the money was being sucked out, or the corrupt ones, both Democrats and Republicans, saw that the money was being sucked out for these projects, and they just decided to cut themselves in. And then later on, they set up their own deals, figuring, oh, why do I have to be dependent for my corruption money on what these other guys are doing? I'll set up my own corruption stream, and this is where we're at now. And the doggies are uncovering all of this. We'll peel back all these layers. All of a sudden, the United States is going to be very rich because we won't be being bled dry by all these vampires. And at the same time, we're going to have a newly structured financial system that will provide sound money and a decent base. But before we get there, the doggies have to go and dig into a bunch of this stuff. Now, their problem is going to be that they're going to run into stuff that does not make sense and shifts their perspective very radically. So one of the things they're going to encounter when they go root into the black projects is that there's basically a three-way religious battle going on within the Department of Defense and the subcontractors on around the issue of the space aliens. And so these guys are going to root around, and they're going to find out the Department of Defense is spending money to fight other parts of the Department of Defense. Not necessarily legally. There are a few legal cases. Those are just minor. They're just tactics. But they're spending money in illegal ways to try and defeat other parts of the Department of Defense. And the way it works out is this. You've got basically a three-way battle going on, right? You've got these corporations, some of which are you can't really decide. These are the subcontractors. Some of these subcontractors, looking from the outside, you can't decide which side they're on, right? Because their top management might be all Jewish. And one of the battle groups within the Department of Defense is run out of the CIA, and it's 100% Jewish, 100% Elohim worship cult, Then there's this other group. But anyway, so the corporations seem to stand alone. They seem to not be involved in the religious aspect of this internal war. They seem to be involved in it because they want the technology, and they would rather have the technology free of these religious implications of this overlay. And so they have to basically fight both of these other sides in order to try and achieve this. And they're not winning, the corporations. They have won in some regards in the sense that there are corporations that have the zero-point technology and can go off and do what the fuck they want. But within the organizational structure, the corporations are, let's say, they're getting beat up in this constantly shifting situation of alliances. So sometimes the corporations are fighting both of the other sides. Sometimes they're allied with one of the sides. Sometimes they're fighting one and allied with the other, and that's going to shift in a few days. That sort of thing. It's a very complex. The three sides are the corporations, this CIA, the rabbis that run this CIA-backed and CIA-owned aspect of the Department of Defense, and the subcontractors. And as I say, you can't tell on some of these corporations. Are they really allied with the CIA because they're also Elohim worship cult people in their board of directors and so on? Perhaps. Difficult to say. Then there's this third group, okay? The third group is called the Langhorns. That's Lang, and that comes from England. It's a name of it's a prominent surname in like Cumberland County, I think, in England. Anyway, and it goes way back to like the 12 or 1300s in this surname. And I don't know if there is actually familial relationship with this third group and that old surname or not, but they're just called this. And the Langhorn actually does translate from Old English to modern English as Longhorn. And this is where it gets a little bit goofy, a little bit complicated. This third group is basically fundamentalist Christians. These guys oppose all different kinds of things that the CIA rabbis want to do with this space alien technology, and they have their own ideas about using it. And a lot of that is twisted by their adherence and their assumptions, their adherence to the idea of the Old Testament. So, but here's where it gets a little complicated. The people that are standing aside from this, that are discussing all of this on the outside, call both groups of the fundamentalist Christians as Langhorns. Okay, one group in there actually has adopted that name as Longhorn, and they have an association with Texas and NASA. But at the top, that group also knows that it's really Langhorn and goes back to the British. The other fundamentalist Christians go straight back to Langhorn. This is just the way they identify themselves. Anyway, so one group of the fundamentalist Christians has this very deep Bible-thumping view, right? They're not Christians, in my opinion. They worship the Torah as the original version of the Old Testament, and they want everybody to adhere to Torah rituals and stuff. So basically, I guess they're trying to be old-style Jews. I don't really get it, right? The other ones are the British spelling of the name, and these guys are northeastern based U.S. and into back, down in towards the southeast and so on. They've got a very large monetary base that appears to be supporting them there. Their view is fundamentalist, not fundamentalist Bible, book over everything believers. Bible thumpers, but rather they have a certain, I'll say radical because that's a word that's applied to them. I don't necessarily think that's the case in my own opinion, but they have an alternate view of Christianity that they think needs to be represented or imposed on all of this zero-point technology stuff because it leads to the space aliens. Now, both of these groups, both of the Langhorns, the southern or the northern version, both of these groups are heavily into the supporting the opinion that the space aliens are demons or evil or dangerous and so on, right? Now, just as a practical person, I agree with one aspect of that is that in an unknown situation, you can't tell who is your enemy and who is not, so it is best to assume everybody is dangerous, right? And not trust anything. But the point of this discussion today is to bring up that the doggies are going to run into these Longhorns, these Langhorns. And they've set up a very intense system within the Department of Defense. Now, in 1968, my father worked for DOD itself and was a liaison to the White House. And I had occasion to have contacts with some of the people in the Pentagon as I was just being drug around and, told sit in the hall, that kind of thing, right? But in any event, so I do know that the fundamentalist Christian viewpoint has existed since at least that, because I would run into these guys who were very upset in 1968 about the pending moon landing. They thought this was an abomination and it shouldn't happen. I never did get the gist at that time of their reasons. Now I understand why, and I don't think that they're wrong necessarily, but nonetheless, they've existed a long time. So this battle has been going on since at least the 50s, the formation of these groups, and now the doggies are going to run into this, and it's going to be extremely interesting to me to see if the doggies bogged down, get out into the mud and can't get at anything, or if it's a case of the doggies are working dry soil that just isn't yielding anything, and they dig, and all of a sudden they let loose a hornet's nest. I think the latter. Okay, so I really do think that the doggies are not going to let this go, and that they're going to run into this dry ground, the bottom that's been prepared for them to find that yields nothing to them, and they're going to dig further. And that's going to set off this hornet's nest. And I think that's what a lot of our spring is going to be involved with, is the exposure of this internal global battle within various militaries and religions, and how there is a religion overlay to all of the space alien stuff, right? And I know there's another aspect of that, which is the ontology. And this is where it's going to get real interesting, because the government's going to have to get somebody to advise them on this paradigm, because we're shifting into it. Whether we like it or not, and whether they like it or not. I don't have any problem with it, but they certainly will. But they're going to need people that understand what the fuck's going on. So the doggies are going to discover that there is this need as they do their work and uncover these various hidden layers that make no sense unless you have this view saying, oh, look, it's a religious war. Right? These guys over here, the corporations, are basically a-religious. They just don't give a shit. A religion is fine if they can use it. Otherwise, they don't care, right? Then there's the rabbis in the CIA who are hell-bent on managing the herd for the Elohim and harvesting children and all of that kind of stuff for their space masters. And then there are the Langhorn who have their own agenda, right? Not all of it is good for humans, in my opinion. Because they're control freaks. So anyway, so it's going to be a big stew, and we're just not sure what's going to be bubbling up. And I really do think that the dogs are going to scratch and dig, and they're going to be frustrated. They're going to tweak their code. They're going to look for other entrances. They're going to look for these other hidden stashes of data that are separate. They're, theoretically not joined. They'll make the joins, and then off they go. And then, as I say, we're going to get into a global hornet's nest kind of a situation. And I think that'll be in the latter half of April and into May. It's going to take these guys quite a while, maybe 30 or 40 days to run into this wall that they can't penetrate with their existing AI structure, because their existing AI structure doesn't understand what it's going to be looking at, okay, which is not fraud or any overlay on the financial system. It is truly a separate financial system and has to be analyzed that way. Anyway, talk to you later. It's going to be a fun year.